Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Adult Bible Studies. I'm your leader, Wayne Williams. It's good to be with you, and I hope this is a good time of Bible study for you. And I enjoy being with you as well. So, anyway, we want to continue on this week in a series of lessons that we've been looking at from the Cokesbury Adult Bible Studies material, where we've been looking at different elements that come about in life and circumstances and where we're raised and how we're raised and the culture we're raised in, all those things that become a part of us and identify us as individuals. Before I get too much into this, I want to say just a brief word of apology. Uh, I'm technically uh, limited, and last week I didn't notice that I didn't publish the YouTube video to the public. And so many of you weren't able to see last week's video. It's now been published online, and you can go back and look at that if you would like to. And I apologize for it not being available last week if it's something that's become part of your Sunday morning ritual, your Sunday school for worship. Uh, but anyway, to get on with this week's lesson, we spent a first week in this month looking at the genealogy of Jesus, and we saw how our heritage, our ancestors, all of that traditional stuff that we become a part of when we're born into this world has an effect upon us, has an impact upon us, helps mold us and shape us, gives us a sense of boundaries and a sense of uh, who, what, when, where, all those sorts of things that we need to be grounded and uh, secure in our identity. Last week, we looked at the story of Samuel and his mother Hannah. And we saw how Hannah had been barren. She had not been able to bear a child, and she went to the temple and she prayed and told God that if he would give her a son, she would dedicate that son to God's service. And sure enough, she was able to conceive and bear a son, Samuel. And when Samuel reached the age of being able to be weaned, to be able to be separated from his mother, from his biological family, she took him to the temple and gave him to the chief priest Eli and indicated to him that Samuel was to be placed in the service of God as a Nazarite. And we saw how our families of origin can place upon us, as Hannah did upon Samuel, a sense of expectation, a sense of hope, a sense of you've already been foreordained almost into this certain type of role. You see that a lot in our world, don't you? In different professions. You may know of some families where several people are doctors or lawyers or accountants or some other type of occupation where the children get caught up in the occupation of their parents, and they see that as a continuation of who they are, an extension of who they are, and that family influence uh, makes a lot of difference in who they become identified as adults. Well, Hannah's faithfulness, her spirituality, her focus on God and God's will, and her focus on the fact that Samuel was considered from the point of conception as a gift from God, and that God had a special relationship with him from the very beginning. Today, we're going to go back into Genesis and we're going to look at a story of two brothers. There's a lot of stories of brothers in the Bible, and sometimes there's uh, twists and turns in those relationships. We know that the Jewish traditions, the oldest being the one who inherited the uh, 2/3 of the father's kingdom or wealth and that sort of thing, and influence. It became the head of the household, and the oldest naturally ascending to be the head of the household. But we also know Bible stories where this is not the way it worked out. It wasn't part of God's plan. It wasn't part of the way things worked. And a younger son usurped the other brothers and became the one who was the leader of the family, and who became the one who was the one who through whom God blessed that family and enriched them. I think the story that comes to my mind prominently when we think about that is the story of Joseph. Joseph was the youngest of his brothers, and he was given these visions early on, and his visions there was the implications that the older brothers would someday serve him, and they resented that. They resented him. They resented the fact that the father, Joseph's father, seemed to favor him over the other brothers. Remember Joseph and his coat of many colors, and this distinction that he had, and how the brothers in their jealousy uh, sold him into slavery, only to find that later uh, Joseph was in a key position where God could use him to save his family in a time of famine and a time of great need. So we see God's working in and through families and relationships in this way. And this story today, the story of Jacob and Esau, it's a story you've probably heard before, maybe many times. But it's one we want to look at today in the context of how this family of origin and brothers and sisters, relationships to parents, all those kinds of things work together to make us who we are. First of all, I want to look at the focal passage for today's lessons, which is Genesis chapter 25, verses 27 through 34. If you're not real familiar with the story of Jacob and Esau, or you want to refresh your mind, you might also want to go back and look even further, starting in chapter 25, starting with verse 19 and reading through verse 34, and then going ahead to chapter 27 and reading that chapter as well, to provide some good background for this idea of Jacob and Esau and their relationship, and how the family dynamics contributed in part to who they were, who they became, and their roles that they fulfilled. Let's listen. Chapter 25, verses 27 through 34. When the young men grew up, Esau became an outdoorsman who knew how to hunt, and Jacob became a quiet man who stayed at home. Isaac loved Esau because he enjoyed eating game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Once, when Jacob was boiling stew, Esau came in from the field hungry and said to Jacob, "I'm starving. Let me devour some of that red stuff." That's why his name is Edom. Edom is Hebrew for red. Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright today." Esau said, "I am going to die anyway. What good is my birthright to me?" So he really is discounting his birthright. Jacob said, "Give me your word today." And he did. He sold his birthright to Jacob. So Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew. He ate, drank, got up, and left, showing just how little he thought of his birthright. That's just a snippet from the story, this family dynamics that's going on here between these two brothers. But yet we can see here some of what we're talking about in this unit of lessons, how these things worked together, that these men became very different men. You remember early in the pregnancy, Rebecca was having problems with the two babies fighting with each other in her womb, and it was very painful and very uncomfortable. And she prayed to God, "Lord, spare me from some of this." And God said to her through a vision, "Rebecca, you're going to bear two sons, and they're going to be two different nations. And this conflict that's already begun in your womb is a conflict that will continue throughout their lifetime." There again, there's part of that mark that identifies us. Sometimes, even before birth, we are gaining some of those genetic characteristics, some of those things that go together to make our reactions and actions what they are and therefore identify us individually and distinctly. And certainly for these two young men, the identification was stark. There was a lot of differences between the two. When they were born, Esau was ruddy and husky looking. He was hairy. It said that he was red. That may mean that his hair was red. It may mean that his skin was had kind of a reddish look to it. But he had a distinct skin tone and hairiness about him that made him much different than Jacob, his brother, who was born uh, more like a traditional baby, not colored in any particular way or anything else, but more like what a family would anticipate a baby being. But so even from the beginning, the physical uh, vision of these two men was different and unique. And because of that, certainly people's expectations were placed on them. They would see Esau and they'd say, wow, he's going to be a man when he grows up. He's going to be a manly man. He's going to be out there doing. And sure enough, he became an outdoorsman. He became someone who stayed outside and did a lot of things in the outside hunting and that sort of thing. He was a man's kind of man, uh, full of adventure, full of seeking opportunities to express his power and his uh, abilities as a man. Jacob, on the other hand, was quieter in nature, less rambunctious in his physical expressions. Uh, Jacob, you might look at Jacob as more like an accountant or somebody like that who would do a job where they might be in an office and confined and not able to be out doing those kinds of things. And we know people that have a combination of the two. I know some people who are very stationary in their work life, but who take every opportunity they can to camp and to hunt and to canoe and to swim and all those kinds of physical activities. And so sometimes people have a blend of those two characteristics. It's just that in these two, that it wasn't much of a blend. One was starkly one way, one was starkly the other way. And with that came different family expectations that began to mark these men individually as who they were to be and who they became, even from the very beginning. Stop for a moment and think about your own family. Think about your own life. Think about maybe that uncle who decided that he wanted to be a doctor like his father was or his grandfather was. Think about someone who early on began to be express some musical talent, for instance, and everybody kind of focused on that child as, oh, they're so attuned to music and to tone and that sort of thing. They're going to be a great musician, and sometimes that influence encourages the child to really direct their energy towards that. And sometimes it's a combination of the two: natural talent that they're born with and the encouragement of others too. But you can see how all this works together to help these two men, Jacob and Esau, become to identify themselves in distinctly different ways, even though they were brothers, twin brothers, born at the same time. Esau just slightly before Jacob, and even there was a little contention because it said as they were being born, Jacob was holding on to Esau's heel, and there was conflict going on even during the birth process. So here we can see that these two brothers are set up to be in opposition to each other in a lot of different ways. Not so much a hate kind of relationship, just starkly different from one another and not having much in common. And you and I know that one of the best friendships come with when we meet people who we share activities with, who we share interests with, and those kinds of things. Jacob and Esau didn't have a whole lot in common. And Jacob seems to have been a little bit more in his head, a little more thinker, a little more plotter, schemer kind of person. Esau was more of a let's go see what happens. Let's get out there and see what happens. Let's hone our instincts to react quickly and to be able to handle a situation on a moment's notice. No need to sit and ponder about it. Just go do it. And so we see these two here in that sort of way. In this passage that we've read today, Jacob clearly identifies himself as kind of a schemer. Uh, he sees this window of opportunity. He finally has a situation where he has Esau at the disadvantage, and to think that Esau would truly give up his birthright for just a bowl of stew is a really stretch. And yet, it's said in Scripture to us to remind us that sometimes people don't cherish the same things we cherish, don't feel the same way about them, and can be pretty flippant and uh, not caring about things that in a way that seems very uh, negative towards to us. Jacob says, "Well, Esau doesn't care about the family. He doesn't care about the flocks. I'm sitting here all the time handling all the uh, procedures that need to be done, making sure the animals are taken care of, making sure the staff have what they need. Uh, I'm the one who's taking care of all this while Esau is out playing in the fields, swimming and doing different and hunting and doing those things that he just enjoys doing." Sounds a little bit like the prodigal son, doesn't it? Kind of a situation. We can see some contrast here where Jacob may have felt a little bit of entitlement to take advantage of Esau. And he sees this opportunity and he seizes that opportunity and he solicits from Esau a commitment. And Esau, in making that commitment, shows just how uh, flippant he is about this whole idea of family and commitment and dedication and working together. Uh, Esau's a standalone kind of guy. Jacob's a stand with others and be a leader and director and that sort of thing of situations. If you read on into the story, you'll find also that there was a lot of other dynamics that went on here in this family. Families can be really complex, can't they? And we find that Rebecca favored Jacob, and she spent more time with Jacob, and she nurtured Jacob in a different way than Esau. Esau and his father were closer because the father liked the taste of wild game, and Esau would bring him the things that he killed, and they would eat it. And he enjoyed that, and he enjoyed. Perhaps he was. Uh, Perhaps the father was uh, living a little bit through his son, getting a little older, not able to get out there and hunt and do those kinds of things as he'd done maybe in his youth, and being able to enjoy that again through his son who was out there doing those kinds of things. Family dynamics can be very powerful. Search your own heart. Search your own life. Think about, first of all, those family dynamics that have shaped and molded you to be the person you are today. Think about not only your earthly family, but think about your heavenly family. Think about your brother, Jesus Christ. Think about your Father. Think about how He has nurtured you and cared for you, and shown you love and grace and sustained you and helped you to have a secure identity and relationship spiritually with Him. See how all that goes together. And in doing so, take a step back and consider all those people in your life that you are not necessarily being influenced by as much as you're being an influence to. Who do you need to give a word of encouragement? Who do you need to single out and focus on and help them see that the good things in themselves? You know, sometimes we're so hard on ourselves. Sometimes we're our own worst judge, and we put ourselves down. And we need that voice of wisdom, that friend, that grandfather, that uncle, that whatever your relationship might be with that person, who'll come in and say, this is really a special thing. And I hope you realize just how special it is that you enjoy doing this and that you do it well, and that you can see that maybe this is not something that you really want to do. But that's okay, because not everybody does well at that. And you find the things that are important to you and that are come naturally to you, and hone those skills, because those are gifts of God. And when you dedicate yourself to using those gifts to God's service, it will bring forth a harvest of fruit for you, for others, and for God's kingdom. What a wonderful story as we think about these brothers and how much their story can relate directly to my story and your story. Life is that way, isn't it? God is consistent. Human beings are consistent. We search and struggle for that identity of who am I? And God reaches out to us and says, you are mine. His Spirit bears witness with our spirit that we are His children, and He encourages us and helps us to move forward. Open yourself up to that encouragement from God, and then, having received that, find an opportunity to be an encourager as well. In Jesus' name I pray. Have a great week. God bless you in all you do. Amen.